Scientists drilled through nearly a kilometer of Antarctic ice expecting to hit rock. What they found instead was something none of them had prepared for. A lake, a living lake, hidden under the ice in complete darkness, in water so cold it exists below the normal freezing point, under pressure that would crush most equipment, and full of life. Not just bacteria, complex organisms, things that had been living down there, cut off from sunlight and the surface world, potentially for millions of years. And this discovery didn't just make headlines for a week and disappear. It fundamentally changed the questions scientists are now asking about where life can exist in the universe. Not just on Earth, everywhere. Think about that for a second. We spent decades assuming life needed certain things to exist: sunlight, moderate temperatures, liquid water at surface conditions. And one by one, every single time we dig deep enough or go far enough, something living shows up in a place where life was supposed to be impossible. Antarctica was supposed to be the final word on that, a continent of ice. Average temperatures around -57 degrees Celsius in winter, no sunlight for months at a time, buried under ice sheets that in some places are nearly 5 kilometers thick. If there was anywhere on Earth where life simply could not exist, Antarctica seemed like the obvious answer. It wasn't the answer. Stay with me, because the deeper this goes, the more disturbing it becomes, in the best possible way. Let's start with what actually happened. In 2013, a team of American scientists, part of a project called WISARD, Willen's Ice Stream Subglacial Access Drilling, drilled through nearly a kilometer of West Antarctic ice. The goal was to reach a subglacial lake called Lake Willen's. Subglacial means exactly what it sounds like, a lake sitting underneath the ice, separated from the surface world above it. Getting there wasn't simple. The team had to drill through nearly a kilometer of ancient ice using hot water, essentially melting a borehole downward. The equipment had to be sterilized to an extreme degree because any contamination from the surface would ruin the results and potentially contaminate the lake itself. It took years of planning, months of field work in one of the harshest environments on Earth, and everything had to work perfectly. When the drill finally broke through into the lake water and they lowered the camera down, they didn't know what to expect. Some scientists thought they might find a few microbial cells, the bare minimum of life, almost nothing. Others were skeptical there would be anything living at all. What they saw on the camera feed changed the conversation completely. The water wasn't dead. It wasn't empty. There was sediment, there were particles, and when the water samples came back up and were analyzed in the lab, there were microbes. Thousands of different kinds of microbes, an entire microbial ecosystem thriving in a lake that had been sealed under the ice for potentially 120,000 years, in complete darkness, in temperatures just below freezing, with no sunlight, no photosynthesis, and no connection to the surface world. But here's the part that stops you cold, and this is where the real science begins. How does life survive in conditions like that? If there's no sunlight, there's no photosynthesis, and without photosynthesis, there's no base of the food chain. So how does anything eat? How does anything get energy? How does a complex ecosystem sustain itself for potentially hundreds of thousands of years in total darkness under a kilometer of ice? The answer is chemosynthesis, the same process we talked about in the deep-sea brine pools. Instead of using sunlight to convert simple molecules into energy, chemosynthetic organisms use chemical reactions. Specifically, the microbes in Lake Willen's appear to use iron and sulfur compounds, chemicals that seep from the bedrock below the lake as their energy source. They're essentially eating rock chemistry, converting geological processes into biological energy, and they've been doing it for a very, very long time. Here's what that means in practice. The ice sheet above Lake Willen's has been there for over 100,000 years. The lake itself has been sealed, cut off from sunlight and atmospheric exchange for at least that long. The organisms living inside it have had to adapt to conditions that would kill almost any surface organism almost instantly. And they didn't just survive. They built a working ecosystem, different organisms occupying different roles, a food web in the dark. Think about what that required. Not just biological hardiness, actual ecological complexity, different species, different functions, cycles of nutrients and energy flowing between organisms that have never seen light, never felt warmth, never had any contact with the world above the ice. That is one of the most extraordinary things ever documented in biology. But Lake Whillans is not the only lake under Antarctica, and this is where the story gets significantly larger. Antarctica has over 400 known subglacial lakes, 400, spread across the continent, many of them connected by rivers and channels that flow beneath the ice, completely invisible from the surface. Some of these lakes are enormous. Some have been isolated for millions of years. And now that we know Lake Whillans is full of life, the question isn't whether the other lakes also contain life. The question is what kind of life and how different it might be from anything we've ever seen. The most famous of these subglacial lakes is Lake Vostok. Lake Vostok sits beneath the Russian research station Vostok in East Antarctica, under approximately 4 kilometers of ice. It is the largest known subglacial lake on Earth, roughly the size of Lake Ontario. It's about 250 kilometers long and 50 kilometers wide, and it has been isolated from the surface world for an estimated 15 to 25 million years. Let that sit for a second. 25 million years. That's before modern humans, before most modern mammals, before the Antarctic ice sheet as we know it today even fully formed. The water in Lake Vostok has been sitting under the ice since the world looked anything like it does now. Russian scientists drilled down to the ice directly above Lake Vostok over decades of work. In 2012, they broke through the final meters and made contact with the lake water for the first time in recorded history. The samples that came back up showed evidence of microbial life, organisms adapted to the extreme cold, darkness, and pressure of a lake that has been completely isolated for millions of years. But here's the scientific controversy that followed, and it's important because the drilling process at Vostok involved using kerosene as a drilling fluid to prevent the borehole from collapsing. There were immediate concerns about contamination. Some scientists argued the samples might contain microbes from the drilling fluid rather than the lake itself. The debate whether the Vostok samples represent genuine subglacial life or surface contamination is still ongoing. The Russian team maintains the organisms are real. Other scientists are more cautious. What's not in debate is the lake's existence. Lake Vostok is real. Its isolation is real. And given what we found at Lake Whillans, a smaller, less isolated lake that is definitively full of life, the scientific expectation that Vostok also harbors life is stronger than ever. And then there's the dimension of this that goes beyond Earth entirely. When NASA scientists and astrobiologists look at the Antarctic subglacial lakes, they don't just see extreme environments on Earth. They see analogs, templates, physical stand-ins for environments that exist right now on other worlds in our solar system. Europa, the moon of Jupiter, has an ocean beneath its thick ice shell. Scientists confirmed this through the Galileo spacecraft's magnetic field measurements and through observations of water vapor plumes erupting through cracks in the ice. That ocean is in contact with a rocky seafloor. It has tidal heating from Jupiter's gravitational pull. It has the ingredients, liquid water, chemistry, energy, that we now know are sufficient for life to exist. Enceladus, the moon of Saturn, is even more dramatic.
The Cassini spacecraft flew directly through plumes of water vapor and ice particles erupting from Enceladus's south pole. Those plumes contain organic molecules. They contain hydrogen, a chemical signature of hydrothermal activity on the seafloor below. And the ocean underneath Enceladus's ice is liquid, warm in places, and chemically active. What we found under Antarctica tells us that an ocean covered by ice, in the dark, far from the sun, with chemical energy sources in the bedrock, is enough. It's enough for life. We have the proof sitting 800 meters under the West Antarctic ice sheet. This is why the Antarctic discoveries are not just about penguins and ice cores. They are about the probability of life in the universe, and that probability just went up significantly. There is one more layer to this that almost nobody discusses when this story comes up. The subglacial lakes of Antarctica are connected. Not all of them, but many. Water flows between them through subglacial rivers and channels, driven by pressure differences and geothermal heat. What that means is that life in one lake could potentially spread to another lake. Organisms could migrate through the subglacial river network. Different populations of microbes, separated for thousands or millions of years, could have evolved independently in different lakes, creating what are essentially separate evolutionary experiments happening simultaneously under the ice. If that's true, if different lakes have hosted separate evolutionary lineages for millions of years, in isolation, in the dark, then drilling into each one is like opening a different chapter of a book that's been sealed shut since before human beings existed. We've opened one chapter, Lake Whillans, and what we found there was extraordinary. Imagine what might be in the other 399. So here is where all of this lands. Scientists drilled through 800 meters of Antarctic ice, expecting rock and silence. They found water, life, and an ecosystem that had been running in the dark for over 100,000 years without any input from the surface world. That single finding cascades outward into implications that touch on planetary science, astrobiology, and the most fundamental question humans have ever asked: are we alone? The answer that Antarctica is quietly suggesting from underneath a kilometer of ice, in a lake that sees no sunlight and has no connection to the world above it, is this: life doesn't need what we thought it needed. It just needs enough. And enough, it turns out, exists in a lot more places than we ever imagined. The sky still hides secrets, and this is just the beginning. Subscribe to Fact Harbor for more mysteries.